so much for coming out this morning as Montclair celebrates the 50th anniversary of one of the greatest events in the history of the world. And of course, we are incredibly fortunate that one of our own, Buzz Aldrin, was such an integral part of that mission and making that great event happen. Thanks to some people who we're going to recognize later, we've got I think a very interesting and kind of fascinating a program for you today to go through some of the history of the mission and, of course, Buzz Aldrin's involvement in it. This is, I'm sure all of us remember where we were on that time some 50 years ago. I can't remember what my kids' names, but I can remember that. It's just incredible to me that was 50 years ago. Just trying to get a hold of that sometimes blows my mind. But it was, and we're here today to celebrate a remarkable mission, a remarkable accomplishment in our history, but more particularly to celebrate the life and the courage of one of the great human beings in the history of our country, Buzz Aldrin, and one of our own. As you know, we've been fortunate, some people are going to talk about it later, we had the honor of having Buzz accept the renaming of Mount Hebron School in his honor, and some folks are going to talk about that later. We've also got some other local people here who are going to talk a little bit about Buzz and his role. But you know, if you think about in the history of the world, only 12 people have walked on that little orb up there, and one of them came from Montclair. That blows my mind again. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to introduce Ilmar Vanderher, who's a member of our library board, but also steeped in the history of this township, and he's going to act as our master of ceremonies today. But I want to just thank you all for coming, and once again, we look around and there's something very special about this little town of 39,000 people. Thank you.
On behalf of the library, thank you all very much for coming out. We're honored to host this Montclair milestone celebrating our local heroes' lunar landing and Montclair's milestone moment, the 50th anniversary. So as Mayor Jackson said, we've got a very interesting lineup of speakers, and 3 years ago I had the great honor of working with three of them actually, on the project to rename Mount Hebron School in honor of Buzz Aldrin. So going right to the first speaker, we're very honored to have with us Dr. Frederick Chichester, who has worked with a subcontractor whose mission was to develop the control system for the rocket engine that helped launch the lunar excursion module gently and comfortably to land on the surface of the moon and take the astronauts back to the mothership when the mission was completed. Dr. Chichester, please.
Thank you. I will preface this remark by saying that I wasn't originally supposed to be part of this team, and I'll tell the story of how that came about. So, when any project as large as this one, there's one prime contractor who hires subcontractors to do specific parts of the overall contract. So in this case, the prime contractor was Grumman, then in Bethpage, Long Island, and the subcontractor I was employed at was Bendix, which used to be located at Teterboro Airport. So what happened was we had a project group assigned to work on this project. They ran into difficulties, so they called in our in-house analytical group to help them. And we looked at their difficulty was that they couldn't get their analysis, their analytical results, to match their experimental results on this. And their task, as was mentioned here, was to develop the control system for the rocket engine on the lunar excursion module, the smaller craft that went to and from the surface of the Earth from the mothership, which Michael Collins piloted. So Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong were in that ship. And that rocket engine had to, among other things, it had to be able to transport them from the mothership to the surface of the moon, and even be able to be flown in such a way that Neil Collins could find a suitable place to land it. The first place that they were near was strewn with a lot of large boulders, and so he had to get away from that. And that's why that rocket engine was so important at the beginning. It was also important at the end when they went to return to the mothership, because they had to start up the rocket engine and they had to use that to bring the lunar excursion module back to the mothership. Okay, so what happened, the difficulty the project group had, they couldn't match their analytical results with their experimental results. We looked at what they were doing, and we saw that they were trying to use linear methods to analyze a system that was nonlinear. A linear system is a system in which the output is proportional to the input in all cases. So we said to them, we know a method that will work, a nonlinear method under these circumstances, and we offer you the choice. Either we'll do it for you or we'll coach you on how to do it, and I honestly don't remember which choice they made. So the moral of the story, I think, is this. It's impossible to prepare to be on a project like this in advance. The best you can do is get the best preparation in general for being effective as an engineer. In other words, it goes back to the Boy Scout model, be prepared.
Thank you, Dr. Chichester. And now it's a real pleasure to introduce Katie Rubacki-Severance, who I worked with 3 years ago. Katie is the founder of Montclair's Man on the Moon Committee, which initiated and spearheaded the renaming project for Mount Hebron School in honor of Buzz Aldrin. And Katie is going to discuss the symbolic significance of having a public building named in Buzz's hometown, and what inspired her to found and lead Montclair Man on the Moon Committee to rename Mount Hebron. Katie, welcome.
Thank you, and good morning and happy anniversary to us all on this great day. I just want to say that the inspiration for forming the Man on the Moon Committee to change the name of the school was inspired originally by the beautiful words of Jonathan Alter and Mark Porter in the pages of the Montclair Times. They were not only, they're beautiful words, they're intellectual, but they were also emotional, and they were really a call to action locally. And I just learned actually last night, I think Buzz Aldrin said that it took 400,000 people to get to the moon. And so, I'm reminded of the saying that, individually we can do so little and together we can do so much. And so there were apparently thousands of people in Montclair who wanted to do something to mark the event and the man. And prior to that moment, the only physical evidence that Buzz Aldrin lived here, was educated here, ultimately left here to go to war, and then in his quest for the moon was that plaque in front of his house on Princeton Place. We've had parades and there's things at the high school, but that was the only physical evidence. And I think people thought we owed him and Montclair and our country more. And so thousands of people came together and supported us, parents, students, police officers, firefighters, first responders, members of the media like Jonathan Alter, and the mayor, the town council, and we didn't know it at the time, but also the Board of Education, and even our future Congresswoman, Mikey Sherrill. So, like any great community, when we come together to get something done, Montclair is known for its progressive ways and forward thinking. And They spent 18 months working toward this goal, and it came together, and I just want to say that it was one of the highlights of my life serving on the committee, and very proud to have been a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. And now we are very pleased to have among us Mr. Ralph Veleka, the Executive Director of the Aviation Hall of Fame and Museum of New Jersey, where I actually used to work. And it's one of the best kept secrets in New Jersey. It's a wonderful institution. Everyone should take time to go visit it, especially if you're interested in space exploration and aviation history. And Mr. Veleka will now speak about the museum's Buzz Aldrin exhibit and Buzz Aldrin scientific achievements and his status as the museum's most famous and prolific Hall of Fame member. Mr. Veleka, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ralph Veleka, Executive Director of the Aviation Hall of Fame and Museum of New Jersey. Also in attendance from AHOF are our President, Colonel Steve Retoff, our Vice President, Mr. Rudy Steinthal, our Museum Manager, Mr. Vincent Karabatis, and one of our most important volunteers, Miss Maria Veleka. We're deeply honored that we've been asked to be part of this great day. A great day for Montclair, a great day for New Jersey, and a great day for America. You may remember in the film Apollo 13, when Gene Kranz, the Apollo flight director on most of the Apollo flights, played brilliantly, by the way, by actor Ed Harris, at one point makes this statement, which I'm sure you might remember, when he said, "Failure is not an option." That statement truly epitomizes America's mission to land men on the moon in the decade following President Kennedy's pronouncement 8 years earlier. Today, my, how time goes by, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of that incredible, incredible scientific achievement. As we know, there were some failures in that quest. Most notably, the horrific fire in January 1967 that took the lives of Apollo 1 astronauts Grissom, White, and Chaffee. Yet, that American spirit and technological superiority culminated in the event we're commemorating today, just 2 years after that horrific fire. Today, we're celebrating astronauts Neil Armstrong and Montclair and New Jersey's son, Edward and Buzz Aldrin, landing on the moon 50 years ago. How many of you in the audience can remember where you were and what you were doing 50 years ago? Oh my goodness, so many. Yeah, it does. It doesn't it barely seem like 50 years, a half a century. It almost seems like it was yesterday, doesn't it? This shows how time can go by. Rightfully, today is a day to honor the accomplishments of Colonel Aldrin. But it's also a day to honor the American spirit and belief that when we as a nation have a singleness of purpose, there is nothing that we can't accomplish. I had the honor of speaking with Colonel Aldrin last week. I was driving home and came up on my phone and said, "Buzz." And I went, geez, Buzz is calling me, So, of course, I answered it. Who wouldn't, and had a wonderful conversation with him. I did explain to him that I was going to be here at this event this weekend, and he asked me to, on his behalf, to tell each of you how personally gratified he was and his deep appreciation that you were having this day, not only to commemorate the 50th anniversary, but to honor his efforts. Before I close, I want to share with you a little story. I had the pleasure, Colonel Retoff and I had the pleasure of having lunch with Colonel Aldrin several months ago after an event in New York City. And as we were sitting down having lunch, he turned to me, and I was rather surprised. He said to me, "Well, Ralph, do you remember, what you were doing?" And I was going to say, "Yeah, why would you ask me what I was doing? That's hardly important. You were on the moon, But I said, "Well, Colonel Aldrin, to be honest with you, I was sitting on a sofa with my dad, and we were watching, and of course I, being a 15-year-old guy who loved technology and loved it, I was beyond thrilled. And I remember my late father, a small, gruff, tough Italian guy from Newark, he turns to me and he goes, 'Kid, they're never getting off the moon.'" And I turned to him and said, "Of course they're getting off the moon." He said, "I don't know." And so I said, "All right, we'll wait and see what happens." And thankfully, of course, we know they did get off the moon. So I told Colonel Aldrin that story, and he just laughed, but he did turn to me at one point and he said, "Ralph, we had our moments and doubts ourselves when we were there." So, even with the tremendous training and the technological advancements, which at the time were amazing, but we know in hindsight we have infinitely more memory in our cell phones that was on that whole lunar module. But the fact is that it just reminds us of the courage and the bravery of not only our two first astronauts on the moon, in particular our favorite son, Buzz Aldrin, but also Neil Armstrong, but the 10 other men that actually made that incredible journey. In closing, again, I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you this morning. We're really deeply honored and humbled to be here. And please feel free at the end of the ceremony to talk to us. We have a small table set up about the Aviation Hall of Fame and Museum of New Jersey. If you haven't had the chance to visit us, please come visit us. You'll enjoy the visit very, very much, and you'll find it a rewarding, incredible experience. Again, thank you so much for allowing us to be here, and this is a wonderful, wonderful occasion. Thank you.
Where is the hall?
In Teterboro, New Jersey. Teterboro, New Jersey, right near Teterboro Airport. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Valecka. And now it is a great pleasure for me to introduce Mr. Major Jennings, who is the assistant principal of Buzz Aldrin Middle School. Buzz Aldrin Middle School is now one of Montclair's main pipelines for producing the next generation of scientists and space explorers. And Mr. Jennings will discuss and talk about what is being done to engage and encourage those students at Buzz Aldrin Middle School in ways similar to how Buzz Aldrin was himself inspired while a student there. Welcome, Mr. Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderheer, for organizing the Apollo 11 50th anniversary celebration here in Montclair. It is a great pleasure to be able to recognize and acknowledge this great American, Buzz Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin Middle School provides a thorough and vigorous academic education for all of our students, thanks to our excellent teachers. Collaborative learning, technological integration, and strong parental support are at the heart of the school's success. The program provides an opportunity for exploration and a lifelong love of learning. At Buzz Aldrin Middle School, students learn to think critically while also learning to respect themselves, each other, and the world around them. The Magnet School. The school is equipped with several technology learning centers and has rich resources to allow students access to solving real-world problems and connecting with people and ideas from around the world. Exposure to the STEM subjects provides students with learning opportunities that are hands-on, inquiry-based, and devoted to providing a challenging, rigorous learning environment in which students are prepared for the world of tomorrow. Technology as a learning tool and a mode of expression and communication is a cornerstone of the 21st century education. Buzz Aldrin Middle School is equipped with several technology learning commons, as well as a fiber optic infrastructure that allows access to technology in every classroom and throughout the building. Students use technology, including multimedia platforms, to become writers, mathematicians, engineers, scientists, and artists in ways that emphasize the construction of knowledge and its application. Project Lead the Way is an important, innovative part of the technology program at Buzz Aldrin Middle School. PLTW teaches pre-engineering concepts at the middle school level, incorporating 3 units of study: computer-aided design, the science of technology, and automation and robotics. The PLTW program also includes the use of 3D printing to design and manufacturing projects. All sixth graders are required to take design and model, which exposes sixth graders to a CAD program that allows them to create virtual images or prototypes of the assigned design models. Ultimately, the models will be transformed into a working model that will be tested. For each model, a design brief is used to ensure the best model is selected. Seventh graders are required to take the science of technology, elective, which requires students to create a Rube Goldberg project, which includes the 6 simple machines in which a marble has to travel through each machine without any human intervention. Eighth graders have the options to take automation and robotics, where students learn about mechanical systems, energy transfer, machine automation, and computer control systems. Students use a robust robotic platform to design, build, and program a solution to solve an existing problem. Additionally, we are constantly evolving, adding interesting and exciting elective courses for our students. Currently, STEM challenges, architecture, game design with robots, and game creation are other electives directly related to STEM. Science Olympiad, robotics, and CS Girls are all STEM-related extracurricular after-school programs that have won several awards while competing in various state competitions. In conclusion, every student that attends Buzz Aldrin Middle School has an opportunity to take and participate in every STEM-related course or after-school program. I am extremely proud to say that the students address race or gender has no influence whether or not they take these STEM courses. We are truly doing our very best to level the academic and technology experience for all students that attend Buzz. Out of all the possible middle schools in the country, Buzz Aldrin attended our schools, ate in our cafeteria, walked our halls, and learned in the same classrooms that our current students attend. This connection is a huge inspiration for our students. It is a constant reminder that if Buzz Aldrin could maintain an A average academically, play varsity sports, attend the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, fight for his country in the Korean War, earn a doctorate degree from MIT, take off from Cape Canaveral, land and walk on the moon as an astronaut, return to Earth and live to talk about it, then certainly there are no boundaries or academic achievement barriers for any of our kids. Buzz Aldrin has been an unbelievable example for our students of what can be accomplished by having tremendous courage and drive to reach goals and objectives never before achieved. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jennings, for that inspiring remarks. Next, I have the great pleasure of introducing Mr. Jonathan Alter, who I also had the honor of working with on Montclair's Man on the Moon committee 3 years ago. He is a noted journalist, author, political commentator, television host, producer of film and TV shows, and he wrote several editorials urging our township leaders to name a public entity in honor of Buzz Aldrin. And he was one of the most active and vocal participants in our Man on the Moon committee 3 years ago and helped influence the eventual decision to rename Mount Hebron. He will speak, among other topics, on the cultural, social, and historic significance of Buzz Aldrin's legacy and Buzz Aldrin's status as a Montclair and American icon. Welcome, Mr. Alter.
Thank you for that much too generous introduction. I mean, this was completely a group effort. Katie showed such leadership with the Man on the Moon committee, and there were literally hundreds, not as many as were involved in the space program, but for Montclair, an awful lot of people who got this done. As I think everybody knows, it's hard to change things, and in Montclair there were people who opposed changing the name of Mount Hebron School. So this was an effort that we had to pursue over a 2-year period. I just want to give a little bit of a sense of Buzz Aldrin's career, because I think the man and the career are sometimes missed when we're talking about the icon. So I think we know that he will live on in world history for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. And you can go to most places in the world now and look in the textbooks of students, you will not find the name of an American president, even Abraham Lincoln. Maybe they might mention Barack Obama in some countries. But every one of those textbooks in every part of the world has Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin's name in it. And at the time they landed on the moon, there were 600 million people watching. Today it would be well over 1 billion, because China and India didn't have any TVs, or few TVs in those days. So we're talking about not just a Montclair figure or an American figure, but what they call a global historical figure, the numbers of whom are very, very few. So, I think of him as a son of Montclair and an inspiration for a life of the mind and a spirit of adventure. And he was born in Mountainside Hospital on January 20th, 1930, which means he'll be 90, it's coming January, and his mother's maiden name was Moon. As Katie mentioned, he was raised on Princeton Place. There's a plaque on a boulder there. His younger sister couldn't pronounce the word brother, so she called him Buzzer, and that was shortened to Buzz. And anybody who has seen Toy Story knows that Buzz Lightyear is now immortalized as basically the iconic name for all astronauts. That's the meaning that this nickname Buzz that was developed in Montclair has taken on for the world. He described attending what was then Mount Hebron School as the, quote, turning point of his life. It was where he realized that education and learning were for him, and that he was interested in school. He was the center on the Montclair High football team that was undefeated and won the 1946 state championship. He went to West Point, where he was first in his class as a plebe, as a first year, and finished third in his class overall, which gives you some idea of his intelligence. He joined the Air Force and flew 66 combat missions in Korea. And then through an Air Force program, he went to MIT for what was supposed to be a short-term program, and he decided that he wanted to get his PhD there. This is in the early 1960s. And he became the first PhD astronaut. And he was called Dr. Rendezvous. That was his nickname, because his PhD dissertation was about docking in space, rendezvousing in space. And I think all of us who know anything about the space program know that without the technology to dock, whether it's the lunar module to the command module or any the space shuttle, all kinds of other parts of the space program, they all rely on docking, rendezvousing technology. So we often think of astronauts as just these test pilots, which he wasn't. He was the first non-test pilot to be an astronaut. We think of them as, they were sometimes called by critics spam in a can. They're just the guys the front men for the program. Buzz Aldrin was a rocket scientist. And, it was in the 1960s when you'd first hear the expression, that guy, he's no rocket scientist, right? Because rocket scientists were the highest level of achievement in our society. They were the very smartest people in our entire world. Nothing was higher in the public imagination than a rocket scientist. And Buzz Aldrin was not just an astronaut, he was a rocket scientist. And that's why he, I think that's why he was selected to be part of the Gemini project. And there were some objections to him. He was rejected at first because he wasn't a test pilot, but he had flown so many hours in Korea that he qualified that way. And then on Gemini 12, which was the last Gemini mission, he logged 5 hours walking in space, the most of anybody to this day who's walked in space. And then they had as they were working on the docking technology, they had a problem because when you docked straight on, there was so much sunlight that it caused damage and problems. And he realized that you could do it upside down, just one of many of his breakthroughs, and it wouldn't matter, that you could accomplish the same thing. But the orbiting technology involved is very complex, and something that after he landed on the moon, he resumed and made academic contributions to orbiting and docking technology throughout his life. So I think the students of the space program know that he wasn't always the most popular guy in the program. He was a bit of a loner. He could be intellectually aloof. He thought that because he was the commander of the lunar module, that he should be the first person to step on the moon. And he went and he had a little meeting with Neil Armstrong. He said, very politely, Neil Armstrong was a gentleman, Buzz, I'm the commander of the mission, and I'm going to be the first one to step on the moon. And as I think many of us remember, they almost ran out of fuel on the way down. They were just seconds away from running out of fuel in the lunar module, which Buzz also had a role in designing and understood, extremely well. So the moon landing, as you remember, Neil Armstrong said, "Houston, Tranquility Base, the Eagle has landed." And then he steps out and says, "This is one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." He was supposed to say one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind, because the way he said it doesn't really make total sense. But he was alone for 14 minutes, and then Aldrin came out and he stepped onto what they call the porch of the lunar module, and he joked about making sure that they didn't lock themselves out, which could have been a little bit of a problem. So that was the first thing that he said when he was still standing on the lunar module. Then when he stepped on the moon, he was at a loss for words initially, and he just said, "Beautiful view." Then a few moments later, he came up with what I still think is the best two-word description of the moon, and said simply, "Magnificent desolation." So on the moon, they could see that they were standing on a sphere. And this really kind of blows my mind when you think about it. They could see the curvature of the moon. The horizon was only 1.5 miles away. And so they felt like they were standing on a sphere. And they obviously couldn't travel over very far. Armstrong went a little further than Aldrin. Most of the pictures from Apollo 11 on the moon were taken by Armstrong of Aldrin. So that picture of an astronaut on the moon, that's Aldrin. And you can sort of see in the reflection on his visor of Armstrong taking the picture. That's it, yeah, that's it, sorry. And Buzz didn't take very many pictures of Neil, but Neil took a lot of Buzz. After they got back from the moon, Buzz had personal problems, and he wrote a book in the early 70s about his experience having as a manic depressive and alcoholic. And this was very shocking at the time because there were a lot of taboos about this. And it was an enormous contribution because before that it had just been this Life magazine myth of these perfect astronauts, and you didn't really sense that they were human beings who had the same problems as any human beings. And in another later book, he had a chapter entitled, "Failure is Always an Option." Stuff doesn't always work out. And some parts of his career after he got back did not work out. He turned out to not be a good manager. So he went back to being a scientist in his later years. And I think his career and what it represents harkens back to his hero and that of all of the astronauts, President John Kennedy, because he was the one who set the goal of getting to the moon by the end of the 1960s and returning men safely to the Earth. And his speech at Rice University in 1962, I think bears repeating for all of us today. And he said, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade, not," he said, actually, let me back up, because it wasn't just the moon. There were other goals as well. He says, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things." He's talking about certain technological things that we needed to do as part of our advancement as a society, and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win. Now think of that challenge in terms of climate change and what we need to do to protect our planet for ourselves, our children, and our grandchildren. And in that sense, the space program and Buzz Aldrin's central role in it could not be more relevant to the challenges that we face today. So I hope that he continues to serve as an inspiration, not just for the students at Buzz Aldrin School, but for everybody in this town, this country, and the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alter, Jonathan, for that fascinating overview. And now we also have, we're very pleased and thankful to have with us Ms. Yin Chang, the co-founder of the Montclair-based L3 Academy, which teaches innovative STEM programs to students. And she will not be speaking, but members of her award-winning school robotics team are in the rear of the room at a special table conducting ongoing robotics demonstrations. So when our program concludes in about 5 or 6 minutes, I urge everyone to go back and watch these fascinating demonstrations. Then, before concluding, I would like to thank and offer very special thanks to all of our esteemed speakers, and specifically the Aviation Hall of Fame and Museums Board President, Colonel Stephen Retoff, Board Vice President Rudy Steinthal, Museum Manager Vincent Karabastos, and Rags Buckner, who heads up Boy Scout Troop 40 in Rahway, for bringing his Apollo 11 spacecraft replica, which is on display in front of the library. And all of our event organizers, Deputy Township Manager Brian Scantlebury, Anne-Marie Zacaras, Katya Woke, Montclair Public Library Director Peter Coyle, and myself. So finally, we are going to close out the ceremony with Montclair's Mayor, Robert Jackson, who will present his own concluding remarks as well as a proclamation in commemoration of today's historic day. Mr. Mayor, if you please.
Thank you, Ilmar. Big hand for Ilmar for doing a great job as our master of ceremony. I'm going to ask my members of the council to join me for this proclamation. And I know that former Mayor and former Deputy Mayor Russo, as the senior member of our council, had some words that he wanted to share, particularly regarding and around President Kennedy. So I'll give you a minute.
That's all. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. It's we talk about this launching of Buzz Aldrin and the space program. It was launched by President Kennedy, as Jonathan Alter said. And I brought my Profiles and Courage book with me, which I bought in 1961 when I was a 13-year-old student in high school. And the key to this is that in it was a pencil, which we formed a club after the launch and after the announcement that we were going to do this. And the pencil says the New Frontier Club. And those of you who are older know that that's what President Kennedy termed as his administration, New Frontier. So I just want everybody to remember that he launched this. A lot of us have had our careers launched. When I was a kid, I got into politics with President Kennedy. And I want to thank particularly Brian Scantlebury, our deputy manager, because Brian knows more about this than my own brother, who's my younger brother, who I'll bring a book to today, who really loved the Apollo program and the space program and NASA. But Brian Scantlebury knows as much or more than my brother. So I want to remember President Kennedy today and ask everybody to pledge to continue that New Frontier spirit that President Kennedy brought to this and that Buzz Aldrin eventually accomplished with President Kennedy's commitment. Thank you.
Just also, too, before reading the proclamation, I want to recognize our chief and deputy chief of our Montclair Police Department, Chief Conforti, Deputy Chief Will Young, and also I see the president of the Essex County Board of Freeholders, Brenda Gill, also back there. And then, if I missed anybody, I apologize. What we're going to do is I'm just going to read the first paragraph, and then members are going to come up and read the remaining paragraphs. Whereas Edwin Buzz Aldrin, being born in Mountainside Hospital in 1929 and raised in the township of Montclair, having attended Edgemont Elementary School, Mount Hebron Junior High School, and Montclair High School, and
whereas since his formative years, I don't have my glasses on, forgive me. Since his formative years at Edgemont, Buzz was known for his intellectual curiosity, which carried through to his senior year in 1947 at Montclair High School, where he was voted most likely to succeed by his classmates. His perseverance and determination were similarly recognized in his athletic achievements, where as a Mountie, he played on the 1946 state championship football team and won the Woodman Track Trophy, which recognizes excellence in track accomplishments, leadership, and scholastic pursuits,
And whereas Buzz continued his studies in mechanical engineering at the United States Military Academy, graduating third in his class in 1951, and went on to become a decorated veteran, piloting for the U.S. Air Force in the Korean War before continuing his studies at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he earned a doctorate degree in astronautics in 1963. And whereas in 1963, Buzz was admitted to the NASA Astronaut Corps, Buzz's first space flight was on the Gemini 12 mission, where he spent over 5 hours on extravehicular activities and spacewalk. 3 years later, as a member of the historic Apollo 11 crew on July 20th, 1969, he became the second person to set foot on the moon's surface. And whereas, Deputy Mayor Mann?
Whereas Buzz has received numerous commendations and honors for his achievements both in the military and in the space program, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Nixon in 1969. After the Gemini 12 mission, Montclair celebrated its first Buzz Aldrin Day on December 5th, 1966, to celebrate Buzz's return. How many people remember that? I was there. And after his Apollo 11 flight, the Essex County Freeholders voted on a resolution to declare September 6, 1969 as Buzz Aldrin Day countywide. On June 2, 2013, Aldrin was honored with Montclair's first ever Key to the Township on October 19, 2015. The Board of Education elected to change the name of Mount Hebron Middle School to Buzz Aldrin Middle School, further reinforcing his deep-rooted connection to the township. Now, therefore, bigger type.
Oh, good. Forgive my shorts, by the way. I wasn't intending to speak. I just brought my son Ryan here this morning with us so we can be part of this. Be it resolved that on the 50th anniversary of our hometown hero's epic flight, the mayor and council of the Township of Montclair recognize and extend their sincere appreciation and gratitude to Edwin Buzz Aldrin, Jr., for his countless contributions to society and for making the Township of Montclair forever proud, signed by Mayor Jackson and the entire Town Council. July 9th, 2019.
Again, we'll get this to Mr. Aldrin and to his family. Again, I want to thank all of you so much for coming out and sharing this wonderful occasion with us. I hope you go through the rest of the day and the rest of the year remembering this great accomplishment, and more particularly remembering that one of our own was so instrumental in making the first landing on the moon and the first walk on the moon so special. There are only, what, 1 in 12 people in the world, in this country, who are 12 people in the country, rather, who, in this town, well, I'm totally confused. 12 people who walked on the moon, as I said before, and one of them went here. And if you think of a country of 300+ million people, it's just incredible to me that one of our own did that. So thank you all. God bless. Have a great day.